They said all the right things, didn't they? I've never felt this way before. You're the one I've been waiting for. I can't imagine my life without you. Every word sounded like a promise. Every gesture felt genuine. And in those moments, you believed it because you wanted to. You thought you had finally found someone who saw you, who valued you, who wanted a real future with you. But with a narcissist, those promises were never meant to last. They were never meant to be real. Welcome to the twisted world of future faking, a psychological manipulation tool so powerful that it can make even the strongest person believe in a dream that never existed. Narcissists use promises like a magician uses smoke and mirrors. They build illusions of forever to distract you from the truth. There is no future. There's only control. And once you understand that every word they spoke was part of a carefully constructed fantasy, you begin to see how deliberate it all was. At the beginning, everything feels intoxicating. The narcissist mirrors your dreams, your values, your deepest desires. They talk about marriage, children, traveling the world together. They ask about your future plans and then seamlessly weave themselves into your vision. You start to feel safe, connected, destined. But it's not love, it's manipulation. They're not aligning their life with yours. They're crafting a story to hook you emotionally, so you won't see what's coming next. Psychologists call this stage idealization. It's when the narcissist studies you like a project. They learn what you want most, what makes you feel loved, and what you secretly fear losing. Then they feed you those exact words back, word for word, until you begin to trust them completely. It's not intuition or chemistry, it's a performance. Every promise they make during this stage is a carefully placed trap disguised as affection. The real reason narcissists make grand promises is simple: control. Future faking is emotional currency. It buys them loyalty, admiration, and your willingness to overlook the red flags. When they say we're going to buy a house together, you stop questioning their lies. When they say I can't wait to spend forever with you, you ignore their cruelty. Every fantasy is a distraction, designed to keep you hopeful, even as your reality slowly crumbles. What makes this tactic so powerful is how it's timed. Narcissists make big promises right after doing something that hurts you. You confront them, and suddenly they're talking about your wedding, your future kids, or your next vacation. It's emotional whiplash. They replace your pain with a fantasy so grand that it overshadows the truth. It's not an apology. It's anesthesia numbing you from the reality of who they really are. The promises often sound sincere because they want to believe them in the moment. That's the cruel irony. When a narcissist says, "I'll change," they might genuinely think they mean it. But their words are built on impulse, not integrity. They crave your admiration, not accountability. So once the emotional high fades, so does their commitment. The future they promise dissolves like mist the moment they find a new source of attention. This is where confusion sets in for you. You remember their words, their intensity, their eyes when they spoke about forever. You replay those moments, trying to figure out where it went wrong. But that's the tragedy of being with a narcissist. The future you fell in love with was never real. It was a story designed to make you stay, to make you hope, to make you give them everything while they gave you nothing concrete in return. The narcissist's favorite tool is emotional debt. They make promises that keep you invested long after the relationship stops feeling safe. You think, maybe if I'm patient, maybe if I love harder, they'll finally deliver what they promised. And that's exactly what they want. Hope keeps you hooked. Every time you think of leaving, the memory of those promises whispers, what if it's finally different this time? Future faking doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. Narcissists use it with friends, family, even coworkers. They'll promise promotions, business deals, or emotional support that never materialize. They thrive on anticipation, the feeling of being indispensable, admired, or desired. Once you're emotionally invested, they withdraw, leaving you stranded in the wreckage of their empty words, and they'll pretend not to notice your disappointment. What's truly insidious is how they rewrite history. When confronted about their broken promises, they'll say, "You misunderstood me," or "You're remembering it wrong." Suddenly, you're questioning your own perception. Did they really say they wanted to get married? Did they actually promise to change? This gaslighting keeps you trapped between doubt and denial, always waiting for the version of them that never existed to finally show up. In the narcissist's mind, promises aren't commitments, they're tools. They use them to maintain control, to silence your questions, to buy time until they decide they've gotten everything they wanted from you. Once they sense that your admiration is fading, or that your expectations are rising, they discard those promises like old props and move on to their next performance. They don't feel guilt, they feel strategy. But what happens when you finally start to question their sincerity? When the fantasy begins to fade, and you start asking for actions instead of words, that's when their mask starts to slip. You'll notice subtle irritation when you ask for accountability. They'll call you needy or demanding. They'll twist your desire for clarity into a character flaw. Because deep down they know they can't deliver what they promised, and they need you to stop expecting them to. The moment you stop believing their words, they feel their power slipping away. So they'll double down, grand gestures, sudden affection, emotional confessions. It feels real, but it's desperation disguised as love. They're not trying to rebuild the relationship, they're trying to re-establish control. Every tear, every promise, every "I can't lose you" is designed to pull you back into the cycle of belief and betrayal. Future faking thrives on one thing: your empathy. Narcissists know you want to believe in the good in people. They know you see potential, not just behavior, so they exploit that. They feed you dreams because they know you'll nurture them. They rely on your hope, your patience, your forgiveness, qualities that make you kind, but also vulnerable. And every time you forgive another broken promise, you teach them they can keep lying without consequence. Psychologically, future faking taps into something called cognitive dissonance. It's the mental conflict between what you believe and what you experience. You believe they love you, but their actions say otherwise. Instead of facing the painful truth, your brain tries to resolve the conflict by clinging to their words. They said they'd change. They said they care. The lie becomes easier to hold on to than the heartbreak of reality. But eventually, even the strongest illusion starts to crack. You begin to notice the patterns, the promises that never came true, the plans that always fell apart, the dreams that were always postponed, just a little longer. The magic fades, and what's left is exhaustion. You realize you've been living in a future that never existed, and in that moment, you begin to see the truth. Their promises were never about love, they were about control. When you finally confront them, you'll see the mask drop, the warmth vanishes, replaced by coldness or rage. They'll accuse you of being ungrateful or impatient. They'll tell you, "You're never satisfied." What they mean is, "You've stopped believing my lies." That's when the discard phase begins. The future you were promised turns to dust, and they move on to the next person who hasn't yet learned what you now know. The narcissist will present this new person as the one. They'll make the same promises, use the same lines, build the same illusions. You'll watch them recreate the same fantasy they built with you, and it will hurt. But know this, it's not real for them either. It's just the same performance with a new audience. Because they're not capable of building a future with anyone, they only know how to perform one. You, however, will eventually stop waiting. You'll stop replaying their words and start rebuilding your own life. The future you imagined with them doesn't die, it transforms. It becomes yours. The plans you once made for us become plans for you. And as you begin to take steps toward your own dreams, you'll realize something profound. The future they faked was never meant to happen, but your future still can. At first, the narcissist won't understand how you manage to walk away. They'll assume you're bluffing, that you'll come back once the illusion wears off. But as time passes, and you remain silent, they begin to panic. Not because they miss you, but because they've lost their audience. You were their mirror, their source of emotional energy. Without your attention, their reality collapses. The actor has no stage, and the performance suddenly stops. You might hear through mutual friends that they're telling stories, claims that you overreacted, or couldn't handle the relationship. It's their defense mechanism. They need to rewrite history to protect their ego from the truth. You saw through them. In their world, the villain can never be them, so they twist the narrative to preserve their image. The irony is, every lie they tell about you only exposes how much they still need to control the story. Over time, you'll notice something beautiful happening. You begin to stop caring. The promises that once haunted you lose their power. The someday they promised no longer feels like a loss. It feels like freedom, because now, you see that their promises were never about you. They were about who they wanted you to believe they were. And once that illusion breaks, you realize you didn't lose a future. You dodged a prison. This realization doesn't come all at once. At first, you'll grieve, not just for them, but for the future they painted. The wedding that never happened, the trips you never took, the life you planned in your mind. It's a kind of grief most people don't understand, because you're mourning something that never existed. But that grief is sacred. It's the beginning of seeing reality clearly again. It's your heart reclaiming truth after being fed lies. The narcissist, however, doesn't grieve like you do. They don't miss the love, they miss the control. They'll often return just to see if the illusion still works. A message, a memory, a sudden "I miss you." These are not apologies. They're probes, tests to see if the door is still open. If you respond, they'll repeat the same cycle: promises, charm, disappointment. But if you don't, they'll fade, resentful, confused, and searching for their next target. It's crucial to understand, narcissists are addicted to the idea of potential. They love the beginning of things because beginnings are full of fantasy, not responsibility. The moment reality demands effort, they retreat. That's why their promises always stay in the future. The future is safe. It doesn't require action. It's the stage where they can perform without ever being held accountable for delivery. If you look closely, their promises often sound exaggerated. "We'll be the perfect couple. You'll never have to worry about anything again." These aren't visions, they're sales pitches. They're not building a partnership, they're selling you a dream. And you, with your empathy and your hope, bought in because you believed people mean what they say. But narcissists use language not to communicate truth, but to control perception. When they sense you slipping away, they might bring back those same dreams. Suddenly, they're talking about our future again, as if nothing ever happened. They might even cry, say they've changed, or beg for one more chance. It's not love, it's panic. They can't handle being irrelevant. Your detachment is their downfall because it reminds them of something they've spent their life avoiding, the truth that they are replaceable. You might feel tempted to test them. What if this time it's real? But remember, if a person truly meant those promises, they wouldn't have to repeat them. They would have lived them. Future faking only works when you're still waiting. Once you start demanding actions instead of words, the fantasy collapses, and narcissists can't survive in a world where words no longer manipulate emotions. Psychologists say that narcissists live in a permanent state of emotional immaturity. Their promises mirror a child's wishful thinking, a belief that saying something makes it real. "I'll be better, we'll be together forever." They speak it, they believe it for a moment, and then they forget. Their words carry no weight because they lack empathy, the very foundation that makes a promise meaningful. To them, it's all theater. You may wonder how someone can say such beautiful things and never mean them. The answer lies in their emptiness. Narcissists don't feel connection the way healthy people do. They mimic it. They study what love looks like, how it sounds, how it behaves, and then they imitate it until they have you convinced. But imitation can't last forever. Eventually the act falls apart, and the mask slips. That's when you see who they really are, hollow beneath the charm. The moment you stop engaging in their fantasy, they experience something called narcissistic injury. It's not heartbreak, it's humiliation. They feel exposed, powerless, irrelevant. Their reaction may be rage, silence, or sudden detachment. But beneath it all, there's panic. Because for the first time, they're forced to face what they've been hiding all along. They have no real self without an audience to believe in their lies. Their promises of forever were never about love, they were about securing loyalty. They needed you to believe that your future was tied to theirs so you wouldn't leave. And when you finally do, the illusion collapses, taking their fragile ego with it. That's why they may seem angry or even cruel after the breakup. It's not that they hate you, they hate the reflection you shattered. You exposed the emptiness behind their mask. But here's the most powerful part of the story: you heal. Slowly, surely, and quietly. The future they promised becomes irrelevant because you begin to build your own. The love you once gave them turns inward, becoming self-respect. The dreams you once waited for start happening on your own terms. In their absence, you rediscover your power. You start to understand that love is not about promises. It's about presence. It's about consistency, not intensity. Real love doesn't live in grand declarations about tomorrow. It lives in the small acts of today, and that's something narcissists can never grasp. They speak of forever because they can't handle the responsibility of now. The next time someone promises you the world too quickly, pause. Pay attention not to their words, but to their actions. Are they showing up for you when it matters? Are they capable of accountability when they make mistakes? Because true connection doesn't need constant reassurance. It needs honesty. Once you've seen the illusion of future faking, you'll never fall for it again. You'll choose reality over fantasy every time. As for the narcissist, they'll move on to someone new, selling the same dream with the same passion. But their performance won't last, because eventually, every new audience sees through the act. The pattern repeats: idealize, devalue, discard, and with each repetition, their mask wears thinner. They're forever chasing a future that doesn't exist because they've destroyed every chance at genuine connection. What they don't realize is that every time they lose someone who truly cared, they lose a part of the illusion too. One day, the mask won't hold at all. They'll be left staring at themselves in the mirror, confronted by a truth they can't manipulate, that every promise they ever made was hollow, and every person they ever fooled eventually woke up. Their future is nothing but a collection of broken beginnings. But you become the living proof that healing is real, that it's possible to rise from the ashes of manipulation and create something genuine from the ruins. The love you have now for yourself, for your life, isn't fragile. It's built on truth. You no longer need someone to promise you a future, because you've learned to build one with your own hands. That's what freedom looks like: quiet, steady, and real. When you finally stop waiting for the narcissist promises to come true, something inside you clicks. You realize that the closure you were searching for was never theirs to give. It was always within you. You forgive yourself for believing, for hoping, for staying too long, because now you understand it wasn't weakness, it was humanity. You loved someone who pretended to be real, but your love was real, and that's what makes you stronger. Every narcissist's greatest fear is being forgotten, and that's exactly what happens when you stop looking back. Their words, once intoxicating, fade into background noise. The dream they sold you loses its color. They become irrelevant, not through hatred, but through indifference. That's the ultimate punishment, not revenge, not confrontation, but peace. You move on, and they stay stuck in the same loop forever. If you ever doubt your progress, remember this: you believed in the best of someone who couldn't even see it in themselves. That doesn't make you naive. It makes you brave, because loving deeply in a world full of deception takes courage. And though they tried to turn your empathy into a weapon, it's still your greatest strength. It's what will allow you to love again, but this time with clarity and power. One day you'll meet someone new, someone whose words match their actions, whose promises are small but steady. And when that happens, you'll feel a strange mix of fear and wonder. You'll remember the pain, but you'll also realize that you've changed. You no longer need grand declarations. You value quiet consistency. The trauma taught you discernment, and that's how you'll never be fooled again. The narcissist's fake future was never about love. It was about control. But the future you create now is built on truth, peace, and self-worth. You no longer chase illusions. You build realities. That's the difference between their world and yours. They live in lies to escape themselves. You live in truth to find yourself, and that's the most powerful shift of all. When you look back on their broken promises, you'll feel nothing but clarity. You'll see every forever for what it was, a manipulation disguised as devotion. And instead of feeling bitterness, you'll feel gratitude, because every lie they told pushed you closer to the truth. Every illusion they spun taught you how to see through deception. You didn't lose, you learned. And those lessons will protect you for life. The narcissist future faking is like a stage play. They play the romantic lead, and you're cast as the believer. But when you finally walk off the stage, the lights go out, the performance ends. They're left standing in the dark, still acting, still reciting lines to an empty audience. That's their karma. Meanwhile, you step into the real world where love doesn't need a script, it just exists. If you've ever fallen for a narcissist promises, please know this: it doesn't make you foolish, it makes you human. You believed because your heart was open, because you wanted something genuine. They exploited that, but they didn't destroy it. The fact that you can still feel, still hope, still believe in goodness, that's proof of your resilience. They faked a future, you built one. Healing isn't about forgetting the narcissist, it's about remembering yourself. The version of you before the manipulation, before the confusion, before the broken promises, that version is still there, waiting to be rediscovered. And once you reconnect with that person, the power of their lies evaporates. You no longer need them to validate your future. You are already living it. So when the narcissist looks back someday, wondering how they lost someone who believed in them so completely, the truth will hit them. They never had you. They had your hope, your kindness, your patience, but not your soul. Because now that belongs entirely to you. Their promises are dust, but your peace, that's permanent. In the end, the narcissist's fake future fades into silence. But your real one begins the moment you stop waiting for them to change. You step into a life that's honest, stable, and full of meaning. No more empty promises. No more someday. Just now. Just peace. And when you finally look back, you'll smile. Not because they're gone, but because you're finally free.